In the cold corridor of an elite pilot training academy, a decorated captain publicly humiliates a young black trainee, not knowing she holds a secret that will shatter his arrogance. The entire hangar watches in tense silence as an unexpected comeback flips the power dynamic. Scene ends on a sharp cliffhanger that hints at her hidden authority. "We don't shake hands with people like you." The words slice through the humid corridor of Northwind Aviation Academy, bouncing off metal lockers and polished floors. A dozen trainees froze mid-step, boots squeaking as they pretended not to stare. Outside the hangar, the late afternoon, sun glared off rows of fighter jets, steel birds lined in perfect formation. Ready for war, yet blind to the battles waged inside these walls, Captain Douglas Merton stood tall, his chest puffed with medals and old scars, his handshake offered to every passing trainee except her. His fingers twitched, but he pulled them back as if they'd been scorched by her presence. Avery Monroe didn't flinch. She stood just 3 feet away, the only black trainee in this year's elite class. Crisp uniform pressed tighter than the tension coiling around her shoulders. Behind her, 2 junior pilots exchanged awkward glances. One mouthed, "Damn." Another gripped his flight helmet so hard it creaked. No one moved. No one spoke. In this place, hierarchy was sacred, disrespect was tradition when the target looked like her. Captain Merton smirked, his voice loud enough for the hallway to hear. "You people want respect? Earn it. Or a handshake." Avery's eyes flicked to the name tag on his chest, Merton. Douglas C. She memorized every letter like a prayer she'd recite later in the corner. Security camera's red light blinked. An unseen witness, or maybe a silent accomplice. Avery inhaled. She could feel every heartbeat echo in her ears. One heartbeat for every door slammed in her face. One for every test she'd passed twice over, just to be called half as good. Then she moved slowly, deliberately. She unhooked her trainee ID badge and held it up between them. The shiny plastic caught the sun and burned a reflection onto Merton's chest. In one sharp motion, she ripped it in half. The plastic cracked like a gunshot in the silence. The captain flinched just for a second. Flicker of confusion twisted his mouth before he masked it behind another sneer. Avery leaned in, voice calm, enough to chill the sweat on his brow. "Captain Merton, don't worry. I won't need this where I'm going." She stepped closer, close enough that he could. Smelled the steel in her resolve. "You should really check your email," she whispered. "I'd hate for you to be blindsided on my first day." She turned on her heel, boots hitting the polished floor in perfect military rhythm. Every watching trainee parted to let her pass. Eyes wide, breaths held. The corridor swallowed the sound of her departure, except for one startled gasp behind her dot. Captain Merton yanked his phone from his pocket. His thumb fumbled the unlock code, desperate, disbelieving. A single notification glowed at the top of the screen. "Welcome your new supervising officer, LT. Commander Avery Monroe." His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. In the distance, the hangar doors roared open, like the sky itself was bowing to someone finally stepping into her rightful place. Avery's boots echoed down the same corridor that had swallowed so many quiet humiliations before. But today, the walls seemed to lean in and listen, curious, shocked, hungry for gossip. She could feel it, the shift, the whispers that rose as she passed. Is it true? No way she outranks Merton. She tore her badge up. Did you see it? Their words slithered behind her like shadows, but Avery didn't slow her stride. The cold metal handle of the supervising officer's door waited at the end of the hall like a promise or a threat. Inside, the office smelled of stale coffee and old ambition. Heavy mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty flight manuals, old plaques, and polished models of fighter jets. A single window framed the airstrip, where pilots ran drills like tiny ants from this height. Avery placed her ripped trainee ID on the wide oak desk, a small reminder of what she'd just left behind. She took a breath, letting her fingers brush the insignia now pinned to her collar. Silver wings with a sharp star that caught the morning sun. Authority. She'd earned every gram of its weight. A polite knock at the door pulled her out of the silence. "Ma'am." It was Cadet Brooks, the same trainee who'd flinched when Merton humiliated her. He stood stiffly at attention, eyes locked on the floor. At ease, Cadet. What is it? Avery's voice held the same calm, unbothered note that had rattled. Merton in the corridor. Brooks swallowed hard. Captain Merton requests to see you, ma'am. She raised an eyebrow. The irony almost made her smile. Almost. Send him in. Brooks nodded, stepping aside to reveal Captain Merton's rigid silhouette behind him. The captain's face was tight, his jaw working overtime to hold back words that threatened to betray his pride. Commander Monroe, said, the words rolling off his tongue like broken glass. Permission to speak freely? Avery gestured. To the chair opposite her desk. Permission granted. Merton didn't sit. He stayed standing, hands clasped behind his back like a schoolboy forced to face the principal. He avoided her eyes, pretending to study the dusty shelves instead. You blindsided me, he said. You could have handled that differently. Avery leaned back in her chair. The leather creaked under the new weight of her authority. Is that your complaint, Captain, or your confession? He blinked. Confession. That your pride took priority over this unit's discipline. That your personal bias just became a liability for the Academy. Her tone never rose. Didn't need to, Merton bristled. My record speaks for itself. Avery's eyes flicked to the file already open on her desk, his entire service record scanned and highlighted with neat tabs. It does, she said, tapping the page gently. So does mine. The captain shifted his weight, silence stretching like a tight wire between them. You will address me as Commander Monroe from now on, she continued, and you will greet every trainee with the same respect you've demanded for yourself. Opened his mouth, then closed it again. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, anger maybe, for the first crack in the mask. Before he could find a reply, Avery leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper meant only for him. We both know the system isn't built for people like me to sit behind this desk. But I'm here now, and I won't be your secret shame. Her words pinned him to the spot more firmly than any salute ever could. Merton's shoulders stiffened. Understood, Commander. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once. Dismissed. As he turned to leave, Avery caught his reflection in the small framed photo on her desk, her late father in his old pilot uniform, smiling like he knew she'd be right here one day. The door clicked shut behind Merton. For a moment, the office was hers alone again, the hum of the airstrip beyond the window, the quiet buzz of the intercom, a heartbeat in her own chest reminding her this wasn't the end of the battle. It was only the first round. She turned her chair to face the window. Jets roared into the sky, cutting clean lines through the blue. She wondered how long it would take for the cracks in Merton's pride to spread, and what new enemies would come for her next. In the distance, could see a pair of young trainees watching the runway, their faces pressed to the glass. One turned, caught her eye through the office window, and stiffened with a nervous salute. Avery raised her hand in return, not a salute, not a wave, but something more subtle, a promise. The airstrip at dawn was cold enough to bite through Avery's uniform. She stood at the edge of the tarmac, clipboard in hand, breath curling white against the pale sky. Behind her, 20 trainees shifted nervously, boots scuffing concrete, helmets tucked under arms like fragile secrets. At the far end of the line, Captain Merton barked orders, his voice echoing off hangar doors rolled halfway open. The steel birds inside gleamed in the early light. Beautiful but dangerous like Merton himself. Today's drill, Merton announced. Stalking past the line of trainees without glancing at Avery, will test your reaction time and chain of command discipline. Any mistakes, and you're grounded for the week. Avery watched him closely. The edges of his performance were too sharp to rehearse. She'd spent enough time studying pilots to know when turbulence was coming. Merton stopped beside her, just close enough that the trainees couldn't hear the hiss in his voice. This drill's more advanced than they're ready for. Let's see if they follow your orders or mine. Avery didn't flinch. Looked him dead in the eye. Then I hope you're ready to follow mine too, Captain. His lips twisted in a humorless smile. Of course, Commander. spun on his heel, blowing his whistle sharply. The trainee snapped to attention. Shoulders squared. Avery stepped forward, clipboard against her side like a shield. Cadets. She called, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the winter air. Listen carefully. You'll execute a standard taxi and stop maneuver before takeoff. Exactly as outlined in your flight manual. No improvisations. No shortcuts. Merton's mouth twitched at her words, a flicker of annoyance breaking through his grin. He turned to the trainees. And if your supervisor says so, who are we to argue? A murmur of confusion rippled through the line. Young faces darted from Merton to Avery and back again. The chain of command was a sacred thing here, and Merton knew it. Avery moved to the first trainee, a young woman named Silva, helmet trembling slightly in her gloved hands. Avery rested a hand on Silva's shoulder, voice lowered so only she could hear. Don't look at him. Look at me. You know what you trained for? Stick to the manual. Do it by the book and you'll be fine. Silva nodded, gulping air like she'd just surfaced from deep water. A whistle shrieked again. The trainees scrambled into cockpits, engines whining to life one by one, propellers blurred into spinning discs. The dawn air filled with the growl of ambition and fear. Avery walked the line. Head set on, her voice steady in every pilot's ear. Taxi slow. Keep your line straight. Confirm brake check before throttle up. At the far end, Merton stood arms crossed, whispering something into his own radio. Avery knew exactly what he'd done the moment the first plane jerked forward. Faster than protocol, wheels skidding slightly on the frost-slick runway, Commander. Plane 3 accelerating out of sync. Silva's voice crackled in her earpiece. Copy. Plane 3, kill your throttle. Now, no response. Avery's heartbeat thudded. She could see the trainee inside, a nervous young man, eyes wide behind his visor, fumbling with the controls. A second voice, Merton's, was feeding him conflicting orders over a second channel. A trap. Avery leaned in, voice slicing through the static. Cadet Marks, this is your supervising officer. Cut throttle to idle, or you'll spin out. Acknowledge. Marks hesitated. The nose of his plane veered left, a dangerous angle toward the parked jets. Avery didn't wait. She flicked the master override on her headset, patching straight into the command tower. Control, this is LT. Commander Monroe.
I'm assuming.
Remote override. Lock throttle on plane 3. Heartbeat of static. Then click. The roar of the rogue plane's engine choked down to a shudder. The trainee inside slumped with visible relief. A hush fell over the tarmac, broken only by the steady hum of the other engines. All perfectly aligned. Merton's eyes burned into hers from across the line. He opened his mouth to bark something. But Avery raised her hand first, palm out, an order as clear as any spoken command. She turned to the trainees. Good work. Drill complete. You kept your line, you held formation, and you trusted the manual, not noise. Dismissed.
Helmets came off.
Nervous laughter bubbled up in small pockets, relief cutting through the cold air. Some cadets stole glances at Merton, then back at her, silently choosing which side they trusted more. Avery caught Silva's eye. The young woman gave a tiny nod of respect before jogging off with her squad. Captain Merton stalked past her, fury written in the stiff line of his neck. Avery didn't bother stopping him. The real victory wasn't hers to gloat over. It belonged to every trainee who'd seen his mask slip today, as the sun crept higher over the hangars. Avery knew this wouldn't be his last move, but next time, she'd be ready. The Academy's break room was never silent. The constant hum of vending machines, the hiss of stale coffee brewing, the low murmur of half-finished gossip. But today it felt like every voice fell quiet when Avery walked in. She ignored the hush. She had bigger battles to fight than murmurs. She set her cap down on the metal table, poured herself a cup of burnt coffee, and tried to ignore the eyes that pretended not to watch her every move. A familiar pair of footsteps entered behind her. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Commander Monroe, drawled Colonel Whitaker, an older officer with thinning gray hair and an easy smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd never said anything overt, never Needed to, Colonel Avery said, turning just enough to acknowledge him. Whitaker eased into the chair opposite her, Woe folding his arms like they were old friends catching up. Heard about the drill this morning? Rumor is, you overrode your captain in front of the entire unit? Avery stirred her coffee, keeping her voice level. I enforced protocol, sir. He created an unsafe situation, Whitaker chuckled. But there was no warmth in it, just smoke curling around hidden knives. Protocol, right? It's just, well, you know how things look when the chain of command gets tangled. Avery met his gaze. I know exactly how it looks, sir. Now how it would have looked if I'd let that plane spin off the line. Whitaker leaned forward, lowering his voice. You know, people talk. They're wondering if maybe this promotion was a bit rushed, but you weren't quite ready for this. New blood, new face. Makes for good headlines. I bet he is. Hand tightened around her paper cup. She could almost hear Merton's smug silence behind Whitaker's words, the same old playbook. Just with softer gloves, before she could answer. Another voice cut through the stale break room air. Funny thing about rumors. Sir, they're never as strong as the truth. Brooks, the quiet cadet from the hallway, stepped up beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He set one gently in front of Avery, then turned to Whitaker without so much as a salute. With respect, Colonel Commander Monroe didn't tangle anything this morning. She saved a rookie from writing his name in the accident log. If that's bad optics, maybe we need better optics. Whitaker's eyes flicked to Brooks, irritation sparking behind his polished grin. Careful, cadet. Brooks shrugged. Just saying what everyone's already thinking, sir. Avery almost smiled, almost. Instead, she reached for the fresh cup Brooks had brought her and met Whitaker's eyes head on. I appreciate your concern, Colonel, but my record and my authority speak for themselves. If anyone has questions, they're welcome to. Come to me directly, or she added, voice dropping just enough to sharpen the edge. They can keep hiding behind rumors. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. But Whitaker held her stare for a heartbeat too long. Then he leaned back, pushed his chair out with a screech of cheap metal, and forced a thin smile. Of course, Commander. Just keeping the lines clear. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing through the hallway like the rattle of old bones. Brooks slid into the chair he'd vacated, still gripping his own coffee like a shield. Sorry, ma'am. Shouldn't have spoken up like that. Chain of command and all. Avery let the quiet stretch. She studied the young cadet. The tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. But there was steel there, too. Quiet but real. You did fine, cadet, she said finally. Better than fine. He looked at her then. Really looked the way the trainees had started to look at her more and more. Not as an outsider, or a quota, but as something solid enough to lean on. I'll make sure the others know what really happened, Brooks said, standing to go. They trust you, ma'am, even if he doesn't. Avery nodded once. Good dismissed. She stayed in the break room a minute longer after Brooks left, letting the warmth of the coffee cut through the cold ache in her chest. Outside the frosted window, a single jet roared down the runway and lifted into the pale sky, free and stubborn, slicing the clouds clean. Avery watched it disappear into the blue and whispered under her breath, just loud enough for the walls to remember, not going anywhere. The boardroom looked nothing like the hangars or the wind-battered tarmac. Here the walls were glass and wood, polished and sterile, lined with oil portraits of past commanders, none of whom looked like Avery. She sat at the long conference table, spine straight, notes laid out before her in crisp lines. Across from her, 8 men, in matching dark suits, flipped through her reports as if they were inconveniences instead of evidence. Captain Merton sat 2 seats down, hands folded, eyes fixed on a spot just over her shoulder, the picture of silent compliance, a lie that every man in the room seemed happy to accept. Chairman Ellis cleared his throat, a practiced rasp that brought every side conversation to heel. Commander Monroe, you've submitted your training evaluation for the new cadet rotation. Some of us have concerns. Avery folded her hands neatly. I'd be glad to address them. Ellis tapped a finger on the folder in front of him. Your approach is unconventional, overrides direct communication with tower control. Stepping. Around your captain's authority? Avery's eyes flicked to Merton, who sat very still, face unreadable. She wondered if his pulse was racing behind that mask, or if he felt nothing at all. With respect. "Sir," she said, "my approach prevented a possible ground collision. The override is standard when safety is compromised." What if the other board members, a portly man named Grayson, leaned back, smirking just enough for her to see it. "No one's questioning your intentions, Commander, but this is a tight ship. You have to consider morale, the captain's reputation." Avery's pulse ticked louder in her ears. Morale, reputation, always code words for the same old bias, scrubbed clean with polite polish. "I'm not here to protect anyone's reputation," she said, voice calm but landing like a blade on. "The table? I'm here to protect my pilots. That's my job." A beat of silence, few glances traded like secrets. Grayson pressed on. "But do you think, given your relatively short time here, that perhaps you might benefit from a mentor?" "Captain Merton," has she cut him off, polite but cold. "Captain Merton has demonstrated poor judgment under pressure. That's documented." A ripple of tension rolled down the table. Merton's jaw twitched, the only crack in his stone face. Ellis raised a hand, half conciliatory, half warning. "We're not here to revisit the drill. We're here to decide. If your methods fit the culture of this academy..." Avery felt the words press down like weight on her shoulders. Fit the culture. She knew exactly which culture they meant, who it was designed to serve. She exhaled slowly. "Permission to speak plainly, Chairman?" Ellis waved a hand. Of course, she leaned forward, meeting each man's eyes in turn. "I didn't ask to fit in here. I was brought in to do the job that none of you would do to fix. A system that's failed trainees, risked planes, and covered for men like Captain Merton because it's convenient." Grayson bristled. "Watch your tone," but she didn't lower her voice. "No, sir. I won't. Because the only reason we're sitting here discussing my fitness is because you're too uncomfortable to discuss his failures. So let's be. Claire, the culture doesn't need me to fit in. It needs to change." Merton shifted in his chair, mouth opening, but Ellis raised a hand to silence him. Avery's words hung in the glass box, echoing back at men who'd never had to explain why they belonged. Then a soft chuckle broke the tension. At the far end of the table, Commander Ruiz, one of the few who hadn't spoken, leaned forward, fingers drumming thoughtfully. "Gentlemen, the last time this academy had a collision on the runway, we buried 2 pilots, and the captain, who signed off on that drill, still got a promotion." His eyes flicked to Merton, then back to Avery. "Commander Monroe prevented the same mistake. That's what we're here to do? Or did you all forget that when you framed the portraits?" The silence that followed wasn't agreement, not yet, but it wasn't dismissal either. Crack in the glass. Ellis cleared his throat again. "Softer this time," noted Commander. "We'll reconvene tomorrow." Dismissed. The men filed out one by one, stiff nods, no eye contact. Merton lingered behind, eyes sharp as broken glass. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might say something, but the words died on his tongue. He turned and followed the suits out. Avery gathered her notes slowly, hands steady despite the tremor of adrenaline still dancing under her skin. When she reached the door, Ruiz stood waiting. He tipped his head, voice low. "Keep swinging, Monroe. They don't know what to do with someone who won't back down." She allowed herself the smallest smile, a thin crack in her own armor. Neither does he.
Outside.
The glass walls, the sky was steel gray, clouds rolling low and heavy. But somewhere above the storms, there was clear blue waiting, and she intended to fly right through. The hangar had its own language, the clang of tools on metal, the hiss of welding torches, the low hum of half-whispered gossip carried on the drafty air. For years, Avery had loved this sound. It was honest, unpolished, impossible to fake. But today, the voices dipped when she walked in, heads bent lower. Tools paused at mid-motion. She pretended not to notice. Pretended her boots didn't echo a little too loud across the concrete floor. She paused beside an open jet engine, clipboard in hand, eyes on the maintenance log. A crew chief named Harlow older, grizzled, grease under every fingernail, wouldn't meet her eye. "Morning," Chief Avery said. Harlow mumbled something. That might have been ma'am, but it got swallowed by the whine of a nearby turbine. She tried again. "These diagnostics, you logged a fuel line check on Unit 14 twice. Why?" Harlow shrugged without looking up. "Captain Merton said double-check it. Said you wanted it done." Avery stilled. She hadn't ordered that. She flipped through the log. 3 more redundant checks, wasted man-hours, busy work, small sabotage disguised as caution behind her laughter. A pair of young trainees lounged near the tool rack, whispering just loud enough for her to catch pieces. "Only got the rank cause. Merton says she's not ready. Gonna tank the program, watch her mess up Avery." Turned slowly. The trainees froze mid-whisper. One snapped to attention, the other just smirked, daring her to say something. She didn't. Not yet. She closed the logbook, tucking it under her arm. "Chief," she said, voice calm, eyes on Harlow's. "Back. When you get a directive from my office, it'll come signed. If Captain Merton gives you instructions that conflict with mine, you check with me first. Understood?" Harlow's jaw tightened. "He's still my captain," Avery nodded. "And I'm still your supervising officer. We don't get to pick which orders we follow. The uniform decides that for us." She left the logbook on the nearest workbench. She could feel their eyes following her all the way to the office tucked in the far corner of the hangar. A metal box with paper-thin walls that couldn't keep out the murmurs inside. Brooks waited, perched awkwardly on the edge of her desk. Like a kid caught where he shouldn't be. He held up a half-eaten protein bar like an apology. "Ma'am, I was just..." Avery waved him off. She closed the door behind her. "Don't get up. Sit." He did. He looked worried. He should. Is it true?" she asked, dropping into her chair. "Merton's telling them I don't know what I'm doing?" Brooks hesitated too long. That was enough of an answer. "He's saying you're soft on discipline," Brooks said finally. "That you bend rules for certain people." He couldn't quite say the words, but Avery heard them anyway. The same old coded poison. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment. She'd expected pushback. She hadn't expected Merton to get this dirty so fast. Brooks shifted in his seat, voice lower now. "Ones they listen to him. He's got years here, old stories, war hero stuff. Makes him look untouchable." Avery met his eyes. "Do you believe him?" Brooks flinched, but didn't look away. "No, ma'am, not for a second." A silence. Stretched. Outside the thin wall, the hangar buzzed with half-lies dressed as jokes. Avery exhaled. "If I hit back now, I look petty. I stay quiet, he controls the story." Brooks hesitated, then leaned forward, conspiratorial. "So don't hit. Back. Just show them he's lying. They trust what they see more than what they hear." Avery arched an eyebrow. "You have a plan, cadet?" Brooks grinned, sheepish but excited. "Not yet, but I'll get one. Let him dig the hole deeper, ma'am. Then we bury him in it with the truth." Avery let out a short breath that might have been the ghost of a laugh. She reached for a fresh folder on her desk, flight rosters, crew rotations, every small piece of leverage she could find. "All right, Brooks. You want to help bury him? Then buckle up." She stood. Outside, the hangar crew went about their business. But the rumors kept crawling like oil slicks under the metal floor. Avery pressed a hand flat against the window, watching. The clouds gather over the airstrip. She could feel the storm building, but this time, she wasn't alone in the hangar shadows, and Merton had no idea. What kind of turbulence was coming for him next? The rain hammered the hangar roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Outside, the airstrip shimmered with puddles reflecting runway lights and the restless sweep of emergency trucks inside the simulator bay. Avery stood over the console, headset in place, eyes locked on the blinking red indicator that meant real. TROUBLEA, rookie. Cadet Silva, the same one who'd flinched in the corridor. Weeks ago, was locked inside the advanced flight simulator for solo night turbulence training. Except the storm outside had tripped the system sensors. Freezing her instruments mid-run, panic wasn't theoretical anymore. Avery could hear Silva's short, panicked breaths over the comms. Cadet Silva, do you copy? Avery said, voice steady, even as her own pulse thudded in her throat. A muffled sob cracked back through the headset. Commander, my horizon's gone dark. I can't level beside her. Merton hovered, arms crossed like he might physically block her from the controls. The two flight techs behind them pretended to busy themselves with cables, too afraid to look at either of them. This is a training glitch, Merton snapped. We should abort the run, pull her out. Avery didn't even glance at him. Yank her canopy. While she's mid-reactive loop, she'll crash the whole simulator. We can guide her down. She just needs steady instruments. Merton leaned in, voice low and venomous. This is your fault, Commander. She's too green for solo turbulence. You pushed them too fast. Avery turned, their faces inches apart. The hum of the bay seemed to disappear under the low storm rumble. Are you here to help or to gloat, Captain? She said. Her voice so quiet, Merton had to lean closer. Because if you're here to help, sit down. If not, get out of my way. His mouth opened, closed. Something flickered in his eyes, split second of fear that anyone else might have missed. He sat. Avery turned back to the console, flicked 3 switches, and spoke straight into Silva's ear. Cadet Silva, it's Monroe. What? Listen to my voice. You're in a storm, but this isn't real weather. It's a box. You control the box. Silva's breathing rattled through the headset. Damn. It's spinning. I'm spinning. Merton's hands hovered over the manual override lever. Avery slapped her palm flat on it, pinning it down. No abort, Commander Merton barked. Shut up. The words hit him so hard he blinked like he'd been slapped. The techs behind them flinched too, pretending to check power cables that didn't need checking. Avery leaned in, her tone gentle now. Silva, find your left horizon marker. Ignore the main dash. Go by feel like I taught you. Throttle steady. Rudder gentle. Count it out for me. Silva's voice wavered. 1, 2, 3. Outside the window, lightning forked above the airstrip. The rain drummed harder, mocking every heartbeat in the room. Avery reached over, flicked a backup circuit, and the horizon light flickered inside the simulator cockpit, just enough for Silva to see a single bright line in the darkness. Good. Girl, Avery said softly, almost under her breath. Bring it home. She glanced at Merton. He stared at the monitor, hands balled into fists. No smugness now, just the cold, ugly truth. He couldn't do what she was doing. Not with calm. Not with precision. Not at all. Silva's breathing smoothed out, slow and steady, like the rain easing off the roof. On the monitor, her simulated jet leveled its roll. Cadet Silva throttled down to idle. Hold brake. Wait for green. A pause. Then Silva's voice. Small, exhausted, but alive. Brake holding, ma'am. Rising steady. See it. The red indicator on the console blinked green. The simulator canopy hissed open with a hydraulic sigh.
At?
A tech ran forward to pull Silva out, shaken but safe. Avery exhaled slowly. She turned to Merton. He couldn't meet her eyes. Not this. Time? You see that? She said, her tone cutting through the low buzz of the bay. That's why I'm here, and why you're not in my seat. She stepped past him, shoulder brushing his, gentle as a hammer. Behind her, the 2 techs watched Merton shrink into his chair, the storm outside finally losing its voice. And for the first time, the silence inside the academy didn't belong to fear. It belonged to her. The morning after the simulator storm. The academy cafeteria buzzed with a new rumor, one Merton hadn't planted. Brooks sat near the corner window, picking at cold, scrambled eggs he had no intention of eating. Around him, pockets of cadets murmured about Commander Monroe's calm voice. The glitch, the save. Did she really override Merton? Silva said she'd have crashed if not for Monroe. Captain Merton just stood there. Brooks listened, head down, pretending not to care. He'd learned that from Avery. Watch everything, show nothing. A heavy hand slapped down on his tray, jolting his fork off the plastic plate. Cadet Brooks, Merton said. His smile was too wide to mean anything good. Come with me. Brooks hesitated. Few cadets looked up, then looked away just as fast. No one wanted to stand between a captain and his target. Brooks rose without a word, following Merton past the rows of metal tables, through the side door, into the narrow supply corridor that smelled like stale bread and disinfectant. Merton spun on him, so fast Brooks nearly collided with his chest. "You think you're clever?" Merton's voice was a low growl. No more stage whispers or polite mask, just the raw bite beneath, whispering in her ear. "Running errands like some pet trainee?" Brooks swallowed, forcing his hands to stay loose at his sides. His heart hammered so hard he thought Merton must hear it echo off the cinder block walls. "I'm just following orders, sir," Merton sneered. "Orders? Don't insult me, boy. You think you're untouchable because she favors you? Let me tell you what happens to people who pick the wrong side." He leaned in closer, breath hot and sour. "You think she'll be here when they decide she's more trouble than she's worth? She'll be gone, but you'll still be here, wearing that same green stripe, doing garbage runs until you wash out, or I make sure you do." Brooks forced himself to nod, slow, shaky eyes wide like prey. But inside his pocket, his thumb pressed harder against the slim recorder Avery had slipped him 2 days ago. "Keep it ready," she'd said. "Truth is stronger than rumor." Merton kept going. It's the same poison he'd always dripped in the shadows, but louder now, the arrogance of a man who'd never imagined consequences. "You want to stay here, boy? You shut your mouth about that simulator stunt? You tell the others," she panicked, "put Silva at risk? You say I fixed it? Understood?" Brooks let a tremor creep into his voice. "Yes, sir." Merton straightened, smirking. "Good man, smart man." He clapped Brooks' shoulder so hard it nearly knocked the air out of him. Then he strode away down the corridor, whistling a tune Brooks couldn't name, but it made his stomach crawl, just the same. Brooks waited until the echo of Merton's boots faded, then pulled the recorder from his pocket. The red light blinked steady, every word captured in digital clarity. He exhaled a single, shaky laugh, part relief, part disbelief. Not so untouchable now. Avery was waiting in her office when Brooks knocked, breathless from jogging the entire way across the compound. She looked up from a thick stack of evaluation files, her eyes sharp but softening when she saw him. "Well," she asked. Brooks dropped the recorder on her desk like a loaded weapon. "He gave it all to me, ma'am. Threats, lies, all of it." Avery picked up the tiny device, weighing it in her palm like it was heavier than a gun. In some ways it was. She looked at Brooks, really looked, and saw the sweat on his collar, the flush of adrenaline on his neck. She knew what it cost him to stand in that corridor, heart thudding, hands steady enough to get the truth. "You did good, cadet," she said, voice low. "Better than good?" Brooks shifted his weight, suddenly shy now that it was over. "What now?" Avery set the recorder down gently beside her father's old photo, the pilot who'd taught her to fly straight even. "When the crosswinds howled. Now," she said, her eyes hardening like steel catching morning sun, "we stopped playing defense." She reached for her comms unit, flipping through channels until she landed on the one that mattered most, the internal board frequency. "Commander Monroe here, requesting immediate meeting with Chairman Ellis. I have evidence of conduct unbecoming of a commanding officer, and it's going to ground more than planes." She ended the transmission and looked at Brooks. He was still there, shoulders squared, eyes wide with the same disbelief she'd carried once, the disbelief that the truth could ever matter more than the lie. "Cadet," she said, and for the first time she let herself really smile. "Go. Get some rest. You're going to want a front row seat for what comes next." Outside her window, the hangar bay bustled, mechanics, cadets, engineers, all of them part of the same system that Merton thought would never turn on him. He'd spent years thinking the walls protected him. He was about to show him they had ears too, and this time they were listening to her. The boardroom looked different this time. Less polished, somehow the walls still glass. But the silence inside was heavy enough to crack it. Avery sat at the head of the table this time. She didn't ask permission. She just took the seat, laid the recorder in front of her, and waited. For the men who'd once asked if she could fit the culture, Chairman Ellis arrived first, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Grayson followed, still wearing that same oily half-smile he'd worn the last time he'd tried to corner her. A few more filed in, senior officers, training directors, logistics brass, and then Merton. He strode in like the room still belonged to him. For a moment, he even looked at the seat she'd taken, the one that used to be his, and she saw the flash of recognition. It's not yours anymore. He masked it fast, though. Sat down opposite her. Arms folded like a man about to deliver a lecture he'd practiced in his head 100 times. Ellis cleared his throat. Commander Monroe, you called this session under emergency protocol. State your case. Avery. Didn't bother with a preamble. She clicked the recorder on. The boardroom speakers hissed, then crackled to life with Merton's own voice. Rough, smug, so confident it made the walls shudder. You think she'll be here when they decide. She's more trouble than she's worth. You shut your mouth about that simulator stunt. You say I fixed it. Understood? Every man in that room turned toward Merton, like they'd never really seen him before. Maybe they hadn't. Not the real one. Grayson looked pale. Ellis's fingers drummed once, stopped. Silence dragged, heavy and vicious. Merton barked out a short laugh, too loud, too forced. This is ridiculous. A child's toy? She's manipulating you with an edited recording. Avery slid a paper across the table. It landed in front of Ellis with a soft thud. Cadet Brooks signed affidavit. Audio verified by Tower Control's tech team. No edits. No cuts. His statement matches my complaint and every rumor Merton spread to sabotage my command. She leaned forward, eyes locked on Merton's face. You didn't just undermine me, Captain. You endangered a trainee to make me look incompetent. You lied about a life-or-death scenario to protect your ego. Merton shot to his feet. Palms slammed on the glass table so hard the water glasses rattled. I've given this academy 20 years and you'll give it no more, Avery said, voice flat as the glass under his fists. Or would you like me to play the part about threatening a cadet's career in exchange for silence outside? The glass walls' shadows were gathering. Word had spread fast. Brooks, Silva, other trainees who'd heard the whispers. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, peering through the glass walls at the man who'd once barked at them like they were nothing. Ellis lifted the affidavit, flipped it over like there might be something on the back to save Merton. But there wasn't. He set it down gently. Captain Merton. He said, voice clipped neutral, the tone of a man closing a door that would never open again. Effective immediately, you are relieved of command. You'll remain confined. To base pending further disciplinary review. Merton opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, the man who'd always had the last word had nothing left to say. Avery stood. She didn't look at Merton. She looked at Ellis. At Grayson, at every other man in that room who'd ever wondered if she could hold her ground. I expect a full statement to the trainees by noon. They'll hear the truth from this board, not from the shadows. Ellis nodded once. You have it, Commander. Merton sank back into his chair like the air had gone out of him. The trainees outside watched him through the glass like he was a ghost already fading. Brooks was there too, half hidden behind Silva. He caught Avery's eye, gave a tiny nod. She returned it, not big, not dramatic. Just enough. As the room emptied, Grayson lingered by the door, voice low, as he passed her. You know, they'll come for you next. Avery didn't flinch. Then they'd better come correct. Walked out of the boardroom without a backward glance, the whispers outside parting like a tide, leaving only her quiet footsteps and the hum of an institution learning how to swallow its pride. The news spread faster than oil. On a hangar floor, by the next sunrise, Merton's name was off the command roster, his picture taken down from the flight deck wall. The trainees didn't cheer. Not openly. Out. But when Avery stepped into the briefing hall that morning, she didn't have to wonder. Where they stood, their eyes told her everything. Some were still cautious. Some still whispered at the edges of her authority. But most, the ones who'd watched her stand firm when it would have been easier to walk away, sat up a little straighter when she entered. Brooks was already there, standing at attention near the back wall like he was guarding a secret. Only he and Avery knew. Silva sat beside him, hands folded tight in her lap, alive, unbroken. Avery stepped to the front. No notes, no podium, just her, the trainees, and the hum of overhead lights that flickered like runway beacons. When I came here, she began, her voice clear but not loud. I didn't ask for permission to lead. I was asked to fix what was broken. And fixing things isn't clean work. It shakes loose what's been hiding in the cracks. A low shift of weight, boots scuffing the floor, but no one spoke. I know some of you wondered why I'm here. If I belonged, if I earned this. She paused, let the silence breathe. That's fair. You have a right to wonder. So I'm going to make you a promise, and you can hold me to it. I won't ask you to trust me because of my title. Won't trust me because you see what I do. Every single day for this team. Her eyes swept the room. Even the ones who'd looked away before didn't look away now. There will be no more closed doors, no more shadow commands. If someone gives you an order that puts you, your crew, or this academy at risk, you come to me, direct. If I fail, you hold me accountable loudly. Smile flickered at the edges of Brooks's mouth. Let out the tiniest exhale, shoulders sinking with relief. She probably didn't even realize she'd been holding. You don't have to like me, Avery said, her voice a little softer now. But you will respect the uniform. If you ever wonder whether I respect you, watch how I fight for you when the storm hits. That's my word. She stepped back. No applause. Just the low, electric hum of a promise that would outlast. Any gossip whispered in dark corners. When she left the hall, Brooks fell into step beside her. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Outside, the tarmac glistened under a pale morning sun that hadn't quite burned the night off yet. Near the hangar, Harlow, the old crew chief who'd once looked through her like she was invisible, waited beside Unit 14, wiping oil off his hands. When he saw her, he nodded once, stiff, awkward, but real. Commander, he said, diagnostics are clear. She's flight ready whenever you are. Avery returned the nod. Good work. Chief, she didn't linger. She walked the line instead, past rows of jets gleaming with promise. Past the mechanic crews who paused just long enough to nod back before burying themselves in their tasks. The work never stopped, neither would she. At the far edge of the runway, she stopped. The wind lifted her cap just enough to catch a strand of her hair, tugging it loose like a dare. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she could almost hear her father's voice, calm, steady. Level your wings. Find your horizon. Fly straight. She opened her eyes to the horizon he'd told her to find, endless. Open hers. Behind her, the academy would keep. Changing, step by step, rumor by rumor, truth by truth. There would be new storms, new Mertens, new shadows, trying to slip back into the cracks. But she was done fitting in. She was done asking permission. A jet roared overhead, slicing the sky. Open with the promise of lift. Avery watched it climb until it vanished into the blue, a reminder that some storms can't touch you once you're above them. She turned toward the runway, boots firm on the concrete she'd fought to claim, her voice quiet, steady. Drifted to the wind, clear skies ahead. When the next storm came, they'd know exactly who they'd be flying with.